Hi, it's Dr. Steve from Misericordia University. In today's online class, let's look at using operators with loops, and let's also review scratch coding. At our last class, we focused on coding blocks that dealt with sound and operators, or loops. After a brief review, in today's class, let's focus on variables. To begin, let's navigate to Scratch, which is scratch.mit.edu. At our last class, we looked at how we could have a sprite play a sound, and we found that there were two specific blocks of coding that can be used. The first one is play sound until done, and the other one is start sound. What we found was play sound until done allows the entire sound to play before moving on to the next coding block. Now, if you say start sound, then the sound starts playing, but the coding immediately moves on to the next coding block. So in other words, if you want to have one sound after another, then we use the play sound. If we say start sound, all of the sounds, should you have several in a row, like I do in this example below, they all play simultaneously. We introduced a type of block of coding called control, specifically loops. And looping simply means that you can have the coding that is embedded within or nested within that loop. You can have it repeat under different conditions. And we tried several different loops. We tried the forever loop. In this case, the sprite will glide to the mouse pointer forever until the program is shut off. And in the second case here, we used repeat. The repeat loop would play the cat's sound, meow, 4 times. In the process, we found that using a loop is actually a very efficient way of coding. It saves you a lot of time and energy. For example, we wanted to have Anina dance, which in terms of coding in Scratch would mean to change Anina's costume several times and play music in the background. So instead of having to type next costume, next costume, next costume, and so on, we simply used a repeat loop and said wait 1 second to allow time for everybody to view Anina's dance moves, costumes, and we repeated it 10 times. And because we said start the sound, which was a musical composition, we could listen to the dance music just by saying start the sound rather than play sound until it is finished. Then we were able to hear the song all the way through, and we also got to see Anina dance by only using a couple blocks of coding. One coding tool that provides a lot of flexibility and also power is the variable. Now, a variable is kind of like an algebra, saying let x equal some number and let y equal some number. We also see variables used on, similar to on a calculator. When we have a memory, you can say add a certain number into the memory. That's also what variables are like. In Scratch, variables are represented with elongated circular blocks. And you can use variables in coding as counters, as timers, and memories. So if we use a variable along with the coding block ask and wait, we can make our application interactive with the student users. Like in this case, saying when the sprite is clicked, ask, and then we'll type in what we want to ask them. And the wait part simply means that the system is going to hold on, it's going to hold up until the student types in an answer and then hits the enter key. And then after that happens, after the enter key is pressed, then the wait is finished and then the block of coding will continue. In this case, I'm going to have one of the sprites say whatever their answer is. So the variable, in this case, notice the oblong, the elongated circle, the word answer is the memory or the variable in which the student can put whatever they want. It's going to be a container. It's going to hold that information, and then we can use that information in some way throughout our application. Let's see what that would look like. So let's experiment with this. Okay, I made a new application. Here I have the cat. I'm going to put a new backdrop. Instead of taking the time to look through all of these categories, I'm going to type school. And here we have 2 school-related items. I'm going to drag the cat down. And I'm going to start off with an event and say, when this sprite is clicked. Now I'm going to go to a different category. I'm going to go to the sensing category. In the sensing category, one of the items is ask and wait. Now it's already suggesting what's your name, but I could click in here and type and put any kind of question I wanted to. And you'll notice there's something called answer right underneath that. The answer is the variable, it's the memory that's going to hold whatever the student types in response to that question. Notice by answer there's a little checkbox. If I turn that on, it's going to show me up top here in the upper left what's actually contained in this. So let me experiment with this. Let me say I'm going to click on this, and it says what's your name. So I'm going to type my name. I either click on this check mark or I hit enter. Now it's now finished. The coding is done at this point. If I click on this little answer, notice it has my name in the upper left-hand corner because I've just typed that in. So I can turn that on or off. That's helpful when you're programming because when you're doing the coding, this is invisible. Otherwise, you don't know what's actually contained in that variable. All right, so we know what's in that variable, and we see that it's working. I'm now going to have it do something. So it asks, and then it waits, and it stores whatever my answer is in the variable called answer. So let me go up and do a looks change. Like here where it said say hello. I could go in and say, instead of hello, I could have it say the name. Let me go back down to sensing. And here's the word answer. Now watch this. See that oblong? It's going to fit right in here. In place of the word hello, say whatever the answer is for 2 seconds. So let me go do that. I'm going to click on the sprite. What's your name? I'm going to change my name now. Hit enter. And now the cat says the name for 2 seconds. Okay, let me do another one. Let me go back up to looks to make it a little more user-friendly, and let me say, I'll drag out say something, and I'm going to place it carefully above the answer. So I'd like to say hello, and then the name. So let's go do that. When the sprite is clicked, and notice up in the upper left, I can now see temporarily what's going on here. Let me pull this up to the full screen. You can realize this is temporary in the upper left. What's your name? I type my name, I hit that check mark or hit enter. Hello for 2 seconds, and then the name of the student for 2 seconds, and then the coding is finished. If you scroll down on the left-hand side of the screen, you can find another block of codes that deal with variables. When I click on variables, I realize that I can create my own variable. When you say create and declare a new variable, you can make up whatever name you like. Now, for our purposes, we're going to click on the default, which is for all sprites. So all sprites will recognize that variable. But as an advanced coding procedure, you could be so involved that you could say only it'll be a local variable. In other words, only the sprite under whom you're coding at that time will even recognize that variable. But that's a very advanced piece. So as for most folks, they're just going to click on the default, which is for all sprites. In Scratch, when you declare a variable, in other words, you create one, I'll click on Make a Variable, and then the variables that I create will all be listed underneath that phrase, Make a Variable. Notice that for each variable that I create, there's a checkbox. So if I wanted to, as I did earlier, if I wanted to see the variable that I just created called counter, and just kind of monitor what's going on behind the scenes with it, I can check it, and it will show it temporarily in the upper left-hand side of the stage. So if we use variables in coding, it can give us flexibility and also great power. For example, we could have a sprite count numbers, and we can have it do it automatically by using a loop, which is a control, and a variable, such as the word counter. So in Scratch, I will go in and first make a variable called counter, and then I'm going to initialize the value of that counter. So here I'm going to say, when the flag is clicked, then I say set the counter to equal to 0. Let's say we do this more than once. Well, wherever I leave off, maybe counter now holds 10. Well, then it'll start from 10 and go beyond. So maybe we want to reset it. So it's always a good idea when you're using a variable to initialize the value so that you know for sure what's in there when you start. And notice here I have a repeat 10 times. And in repeat, I have, in that loop, I have the sprite ready to say whatever the number held in the variable called counter for 1 second, and then we're going to change the counter by 1, which simply means we're going to increment the counter. We're going to add 1 to it each time. So the first time through, we initialize the variable to 0, and then repeat 10. Okay, so now we're in the first time. Say the counter for 1 second, it'll come up with the number, add 1 to it, it'll go back to repeat it, say the counter again, and add 1 to it, and so on and so forth until it hits 10. If we wanted to, we could even add some other variations to this. For example, we could ask the student, what number would you like to see this sprite count up to? And then, instead of saying repeat and type a number like 10, we could put a variable in there. Let's take a look at that in Scratch and see how great this can be. So I'm going to begin by creating a variable. I've clicked in the coding block area into variables, and here it has one already made for me called my variable. It says make one. So I'm going to click on make a variable. I'm going to type whatever it's going to be, and I'm going to call it a counter. But I could put any name there for all sprites, so everybody understands and recognizes it, and I say OK. So here it is, counter. And notice the little checkbox is on. If it's on, it tells me what the counter actually is. All right, so let's go and employ this counter. Let's use it in some way. So I'm going to go up to, so here I have the cat. I'm going to go up to looks, and I'm going to say the counter. So before we said say hello for 2 seconds. Let me drag this one out. I'm going to say, I'm going to go back down to the variable area. And here's the word counter. Instead of hello, I'm going to put the word counter in there. So instead of an exact text, a literal string, instead whatever number is contained in the word counter. And instead of 2 seconds, I'm going to make it a little bit shorter than that. I'm going to say 1 second. So right now, if I click on this and I watch the staging area, 0 is in the counter, and the cat said 0. Now, let me change the counter. change it by 1. If I click on this, now it says 0. Now the cat says 1. Now the cat says 2. So we keep incrementing by 1 the counter. Now you can see that if I click again, now the counter is 3. So there's a good reason to set the counter initially to something. So let me pull this one out, set counter to, I could set it to 0 or to 1 or whatever value I want to put in this. Now, let me go in and let's go to the control area and let's get a repeat loop. So I'm going to set the counter to 0. I don't want to keep doing that. So I'll do that one time. And then I'm going to drag these other pieces. Whoops. So here it gets a little tricky sometimes to get all these pieces in place. Okay, now I have them hooked up. So now I'm saying say, here's 0. And the first time through, it's saying say the counter for 1 second, add 1, and go back. But in this case, if I want to start at the number 1, then I'll set my initial value of counter to 1. Okay, now let me get, I'm going to take this, steal this from up here. Whoops. I'm connecting them all up here by mistake. Here we go. When the sprite is clicked, set the counter to 1 and then run it. So let's do it. You'll notice on the stage, the cat started at 1 and is now counting up to 10 and stopped. Now that was cool by itself. If we want to, we could even go up and we could do in this sensing area, we said that there was an ask and wait. And it puts it in this variable called answer. And I have this one still showing that prior to this it held my name. I'm going to drag this over here and I'm going to separate this down and let me squeeze this one in. So this is a second variable I can use. Instead of what's your name, I'm now going to say how high do you want me to count for you? So this text will just be spoken by the cat and it's going to wait. And remember that this information, whatever the user types, the student will type it in a variable called answer. So instead of where it says repeat 10 times, what I could do, notice that that's that oblong circular pattern, I could say take the answer and I'm dragging it over and I'm going to replace the number 10 with the word answer. So look how great this is going to be, because if the student says I want you to count to 100 or 10 or 50, it won't matter, because that'll be completely flexible according to what the student types. So let's go ahead and do it. When the sprite is clicked, so let me go up and click the sprite. How high do you want me to count for you? And I'm going to type a number here. And I'm going to keep it low. I'm going to say 7. And there goes the cat, counting from 1 through 7. Now, just for fun, I'm going to add one more piece on the bottom to show you that something could end up looking complex, but if you take it step by step, it's really not going to be that hard at all. When this loop is finished and the cat has finished counting however high the user has suggested, now I'm going to say something, and in this case, instead of putting a variable, I'm going to put some text in here. Would you, well, I'll say something like, hope you liked that. Would you like me to count again for 2 seconds? Now, to make this more dramatic, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to go down to the variable area, and I'm going to turn off the counter, because I don't need to see it up here now. I know that it's working. And I can go to the sensing area. I can turn off the monitoring of the word answer. Notice they're no longer in the upper left-hand side of the stage. And to make it more dramatic, I'm going to go up to the full screen. I'm going to click on the cat. How high do you want me to count? I'm going to say a small number, 5. And there goes the cat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hope you liked it. Would you like me to count again? So using Scratch and using some simple but very powerful tools that are also available in all other computer languages and coding platforms, you can really do some powerful, interesting things. For today's lab time, let's create a brief Scratch application to do the following. Start by adding a sprite and add a backdrop. Then have the sprite describe what the activity is about. So in other words, have a character say something like, I am going to count by tens. Then use a loop and have that sprite count by tens. Now, if you're adventurous, optionally use the ask and wait block of coding to ask the user, how high do you want the sprite to count? Be creative, have fun, and I look forward to seeing you at our next virtual class.